Okay, so this is my video on tuning the Rekon 5, and the steps I followed are very similar to the ones I followed with the Chimera 7. So if you haven't watched that video, I do recommend it. I get into a little bit more detail there. The great thing about the Chimera 7 tune was it gave me a starting point for this frame, and so I basically used, and the main experimentation is in filter settings. So I basically used the best filter settings that I came up with for the Chimera 7 and then tuned on that basis. And it actually turned out pretty well. I might try and refine that a little bit, but I'm pretty happy with the way the tune came out. Uh, so let me just briefly take you through that process. So the first thing to note is that the harmonic notch is enabled. I think I covered this in another video, but it's super important. Need the harmonic notch enabled. This is bidirectional D-shot firmware, which again is super important to use bidirectional D-shot to get the fast feedback of RPM information, which is what gives you really great filtering. And so I've got mode 3, which is ESC telemetry. And then the frequency and bandwidth are set to 80 and 40. Now, these numbers don't really matter that much, as it's the ratio that matters. So these are the defaults, and it's sort of 80 to 40, and so that's good enough. The algorithm will change those based on RPM, and that's fine. And then the options are set to 6. So this is a bit mask, and so I think maybe we can have a look at this in the parameter list. When the pop-up won't work, I'll abandon that. So this is a bit mask. So bit 0 is the number 1, bit 2, bit 1 is the number 2, bit 2 is the number 4, and so on. So 6 means bit 1 and bit 2 are set, so 4 plus 2. And bit 1, the number 2, means a notch per motor, which is really important. You basically want a harmonic notch filter on each motor, especially when doing things like a yaw or fast roll, where the RPMs of the motors will vary quite significantly, and so you want a notch per motor to cover all of those frequencies. And then bit 2, so the number 4, it means get the feedback at the loop rate rather than the regular 200 hertz. So that means we get faster feedback. So that's really important to have this option set to 6. Reference set to 1, that's the standard for ESC telemetry. And I've actually got harmonics set to 1, which is the default. In 4.2 you can increase the number of harmonics, and I might do that at a later stage to see if I get any better tune, but for now harmonics are set to 1. If you remember earlier, the gyro filter is set to 150, and this is one of the really important things about the filter setup for these kind of copters, is once you've got this very precise harmonic notch set up, you can then set a pretty high gyro filter, so 150 hertz here. I think the default is 20 hertz, so you can see that's a big deal. And then I've got Filt D, so the D term filter, set to 75 for each of these roll, pitch and yaw, and that's half of the gyro filter, which seems to work out quite well. And then target filter relates more to sort of the speed of pilot input, so setting this to 30 for roll and pitch, and then 20 for yaw is very you can do this on any copter basically, regardless of size, so it's not really affected by the tune, and doesn't really affect the tune per se. So those are my filter setups. That's my filter setup. And what I did was I ran autotune, and I actually ran autotune. So I ran it with this Acro value of 0.075, which is sort of a little bit lower than the default, which is 0.1. And this is what I did with the Chimera 7, and that worked really well. This particular build is even lower noise than the Chimera 7, so it's a really, really clean build. And so if you've got a clean build, you want to push this number higher for noisy builds, because otherwise you get a very sloppy tune. But if the build is very clean, then you don't need to sort of break through the noise. I suppose that's how I would sort of visualize it. And so you can go with this Acro value of lower, and so I use 0.075 here, and that works very well. And I auto-tune all three axes at the same time. And so what I did was I auto-tuned twice. So first to get, I obviously had to get, I actually started off with values from a smaller copter and just kept lowering those until I didn't get any oscillation, got it off the ground, and then I could run auto-tune. First auto-tune gave me a half decent tune, and then I ran it again to get a much more precise tune. And that gave me good values for roll and pitch. And then as with the Chimera 7, it gives you good enough values for yaw without actually adding any determ. And the secret to getting good yaw response is adding determ. So I did those two auto tunes. I then increased the determ from 0 by factors of 10. I did this for the Chimera 7 as well. I got this in on a video there. So you start off with, I think, 0.0001 for the determ. So adding determ is going to, at some point, the copter is going to experience yaw oscillation, and that you can burn motors and disappear into the air and all that sort of stuff. So started off with 0.0001, and then tried 0.001, and then tried 0.01. And all of these, the copter flew fine, no oscillation. And then I tried 0.1, and at that point the oscillation of the copter was very, very obvious. And if I can, I might sort of do a little bit of a hover just to show that, but just so you can see what that looks like. But then I dialed down once I'd found that the sort of range at which it oscillated, I then reduced it in by 10% each time until I found the D number where it didn't oscillate, and then I reduced it by another 25%. So I think that the number that it didn't oscillate at was 0.02, and so I've reduced it by another 25% to get to 0.015 here, which gives a good value for D. And then what I did was I ran auto-tune again, but only on roll and pitch. So that the problem with one of the things that auto-tune does is it sets these D values to 0 before it does the tune. And so if you run auto-tune on yaw again, once you've done a manual tune, you lose your manual tune. So, but one of the things you find is that yaw D term makes yaw a lot more stable, and your oscillation, not the oscillation, but its sort of ability to reject disturbance, influences the crispness of the roll and pitch tune. So what you want to do is you dial in D, get yaw good, and then you do roll and pitch again. So run auto tune on roll and pitch again, and then you get a crisper value PIDs for roll and pitch. And what I found was that these numbers went up at that point. And that is the tune that I got. So I think some of these other settings you'll see in the tuning guide. This basically is the same as the hover thrust, so 0.11. This is double the hover thrust, 0.22. All of these numbers are covered in the tuning guide. Didn't do anything special there. And that was essentially it. So auto-tune twice, dial in D, auto-tune again, but only on roll and pitch. Job done. Okay, so I took it out to the field. Okay, starting to do some flight tests with the Rekon 5, and I've got it auto-tuned. You can see it's flying quite well there, quite stable. I haven't got my hands on the sticks, so first thing I'm going to do is a bit of a range check. Just I'll fly around and loiter and see how far the range goes out before I lose it. Just spent ages recording a video on the camera bit, so that was no good. So that went pretty well. I flew around in loiter all around the field. No radio fail-safes, which is the main thing, so that was good. The RSSI dropped reasonably low, maybe 30 at sort of the extreme end, maybe when I was behind me, but still was pretty good. And then I switched to Acro, was able to fly around in Acro, really good control. I was really pleased with the handling of the copter. Was able to do a couple of flips and rolls, all perfect there. Good control out of the rolls. Couple of things I noticed were the battery voltage got quite low, although it still said it had sort of more than half a battery left. So either that's just because it's cold and the battery's struggling a bit, or it's because I've got the current sensor not set quite correctly. And then the other thing I noticed was just at full throttle there was a little bit of wobble, and that usually for me means, especially on these smaller copters, that thrust expo is a bit too high. So I'll probably try dropping that a bit. Have to do another auto tune to make that work. But overall, pretty pleased. Worked pretty well. Was able to do RTL, came back fine, and yeah, seems pretty good. All right, so pretty successful. So what I'll do now is show you the video of the Acro flight, and then I'll have a quick look at the log. All right, here we go. So it's slightly annoying, the VTX message keeps coming through because of this bug with the TBS firmware, but hopefully we'll get that fixed at some point. So you can see controls pretty good. And yeah, try to roll there, and you see, nice thing about the roll, you can see you snap out of the roll and it just stops. Like there's no kind of bounce back, which is kind of what you're looking for with poor control. So that's very, very crisp indeed, which is nice. We did a bit of a flip, and although it looks like bounce back, that's actually more down to my handling of the sticks than it is of the copter itself. And then I think I tried, we have to keep an eye on this, the current here. I think right, you can see it goes up to 30 amps, which is me just gunning the throttle to see how fast it goes. Can't really see there, but there was a little bit of wobble. And the other thing is 30 amps seems quite low, so I concluded in the video that that the current sensor was set incorrectly, and that does appear to be the case. So I've done another calibration of that. That seems to be a bit better. Vibration compensation on. I'm not sure why that is. I think possibly that's because the GPS was glitching some from flying around. And so the battery was getting a bit lower, but the milliamp hours seemed really, the current draw seemed very low. So this is kind of the suspicious thing, was the battery was getting down to sort of 14 volts where I sort of wanted to stop. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to recalibrate the current sensor. And then shortly we'll hit RTL. I think I go over, and then yeah, now we hit RTL. You see, and The nice thing about RTL is on the Chimera you could see a definite wobble on RTL, and that was something I had to work on quite hard to fix. But on this RTL, it looks pretty smooth. Okay, so I'll just pull up the logs now. Okay, so here we are. So Leonard gave me a lot of grief about this log because it had lots of gaps in. And one of the problems I found with, I had one of these older Kakut H7s, which had a faulty flash chip on that wasn't very large. And so over the weekend, after these flights, I then resoldered a new one on with a bigger chip on, so hopefully I'll get better logs here. So we have a quick look. So I quite like looking at throttle, so you can see that we're down, not getting much above 0.3 throttle, but I do try and gun it. If you remember that one point in the flight where I tried to gun it, you can see that. So if I go down to the rate values, so this is roll out, pitch out, yaw out, and then A out is the throttle value. So the nice thing you can see about this is that although they're pretty, this is what Leonard was complaining about, there's not a lot of data here, but if you remember from my other videos, you want below 10%, 0.1, and these are well below 10%, so even flying around, so they're below 5%, which is great. So we can unzoom. We go. Okay, so we're back here, and you can see we hit RTL, I think here somewhere. Doesn't show the mode. Let's see if we're in the mode on here. Yeah, okay, so RTL is here. You can see we hit RTL, and even while we're on RTL, I mean the values are moving about, but they're not too bad. So the other thing we want to look at, if I clear that, is the actual values. So if we look at roll first, so target and actual. So you can see here on roll that target and actual tracing quite well. So these are in degrees. So this is 1 degree. So the error here is, I think these are in degrees. So the error here is like less than half a degree. You can see that here. I wonder where, let's just bring up the throttle here. Ooh. Okay, there we go. So you can see where I gunned the throttle, this is what I thought, where I gunned the throttle to max, you can see that roll loses it a little bit. And so this was the wobble I was seeing. And I think if we look at pitch, target, actual, let's see here, you can see here pitch is, so this is pitch, actual, pitch, target here. So you can see again we sort of lose the target pitch a little bit. So this is one of the reasons I'm going to just try reducing the thrust expo value, just to see if this is kind of overcooked at high throttle, but really not bad at all. And then if we actually look at roll here. So roll, desired roll. You can see where I did these rolls and flips here. So all these are rolls here. You can see that the error values are really pretty small, So very difficult to tell much there. And similarly, see, one of the things you're looking for is as you come out of the roll, what does the error look like? I mean, there's really not a lot there. If we look at the point values, so here we are. Oops, why is this not here? There we go. So that's 50, that's 48.6. We've got 1.4 degrees of error coming out of that roll, which is really pretty good. You know, not bad at all. If we look at pitch, let's clear that graph. Pitch, and again look at the flip we did here, or I did here. So what's going on here? So we do the flip, we come out here. So there's a bit more error going on here, 37 to 43, so maybe 5 degrees of error. I usually expect pitch to be a bit worse, but that's really, again, not bad at all. Really looking pretty sharp as a tune. And then the other thing it's nice to check is, put the throttle back on here, is just for vibes and clipping. So we've got vibes down here. Clipping, no clipping at all, which is brilliant. And then the vibes, X vibes are at, 6 to 10, which is brilliant. Y vibes, which is pitched a bit higher, up to about sort of 12, maybe 15, but again, not bad at all. Then Z vibes are way down. So this is a very low noise build, which is fantastic. Really nice to see. And in terms of tune, I think you could say that's a success. So I will try and get a little bit more out of it, but I think for a kind of standard tune, this is really pretty impressive, and just sort of what I want to see. Okay, so that's really it. The things I'm just going to tweak slightly and do the same tuning process just to see if I can get a little bit more is so one is the current setup, and I've changed this already. So this is amp per volt. Yeah, interesting. So that's not what I set it to earlier. I don't know why that. So I set. So this is the default, but actually what I found was 84.5 actually worked better. And then also I want the offset was, I believe, minus 0.02, something like that. That gave pretty good values. And then the other thing is MOT thrust. So MOT thrust expo is at 0.55. I'm going to drop that to 0.50. And that feel, it's on my mini quads, I've got this at 0.45. So I think probably dropping it to that seems okay. And I'll do another tune and see how it looks, but I'm pretty pleased with the tune as it stands.